You know that feeling when you put on a coat you haven't worn since you were a kid?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Right. You slip your arms in, and suddenly it's tight right across the shoulders. The sleeves are riding halfway up your forearms, and you physically just don't fit the shape of it anymore.
It's technically yours, but it's not made for you anymore.
Exactly. And that profound, quiet agony of returning home when you no longer fit the shape of the place you left, that is exactly the mission of our deep dive today. So we're looking at this deeply affecting piece of source material. It's an excerpt from a novel titled John of John by Douglas Stuart.
And it is just an incredibly potent snapshot of a father and a son. I mean, they're separated by 300 miles of rugged Scottish geography, sure, but the real distance between them is, it's built out of religion, sexuality, and this suffocating generational silence.
Okay, let's unpack this. We really need to set up this core idea that sort of shadows the entire discussion. There's this concept introduced right at the start, a quote suggesting that islanders the world over are born for exile.
Right, they get this idyllic, deeply rooted childhood, but eventually the island just leaves them with nowhere to express who they've actually become.
Yeah, and that perfectly frames our two central figures here. We have Cal, the son, who is enduring this miserable secret exile in the city of Edinburgh. And then we have John, his rigidly devout father, who has, remained firmly planted on the islands.
To truly understand the physical journey that Cal eventually makes back to the island, we really first need to examine the immense invisible distance between them while they're apart. And the way they attempt to bridge that distance is through a weekly phone call.
And the mechanics of this phone call tell you literally everything you need to know about their relationship. So Cal calls his dad every Thursday at 6 p.m. and then twice on Sundays, but Cal is completely broke.
Like beyond broke.
Yeah, he's hiding his poverty from his father. So they use this super antiquated system. Cal stands in a freezing red phone box in Edinburgh, dials the number, waits to hear exactly 3 pips on the line, and then hangs up.
Right, so he uses those 3 pips as a signal to his father to call him back. That way the father absorbs the cost of the long-distance toll.
And the lengths Cal goes to for this are just agonizing. He's standing in this phone box in a public park called the Meadows, pretending to talk into a dead receiver just so no one else in the queue takes the phone while he waits for it to ring.
It's so bleak.
It is. He's surrounded by city life, people playing rugby, walking dogs, but he is trapped inside this tiny glass box in the rain.
And when the phone finally does ring and they speak, the conversation is defined almost entirely by its omissions. Like, Cal is curating this highly fictionalized version of his life.
I found the details of his actual life to be staggering. I mean, he is practically homeless. He's sleeping on different couches. But what really got me was the milk bottle.
Oh, the tide line.
Yes. He's stealing tiny sips of milk from his flatmate's bottles in the fridge, and he literally studies the tide line of the milk, the exact level it was at, so he can top it up with a splash of tap water without them noticing.
That is the mathematics of absolute desperation.
Exactly. I mean, it's like how people curate their lives on social media today, pretending everything is perfect except Cal's doing it shivering in a phone box. So why go through all this trouble to project a fine life to his dad?
Well, because telling the truth would shatter the only foundation they have left.
He's literally cleaning 6 splattered pub toilets for a crew of Romanian women who are gouging his wages just to store his mop. Why not just say, "Dad, I'm starving, I need help"?
Because Cal understands that sharing his reality, especially his poverty or the fact that he's secretly spending his nights with a gentle Welshman, that would obliterate the fragile connection they share.
Wow. Yeah.
John has never even been to the capital. The city is just an abstraction to him. If Cal talks too much about Edinburgh, John's anxiety spikes, and the conversation inevitably devolves into a rigid sermon about sin and worldly corruption.
So Cal censors himself to protect his father, and John feels that resulting silence the only way he knows how, by presenting psalms. He literally sings lines of scripture over the phone.
Yes. For weeks, John's mind has been stuck on the book of Galatians.
Which I had to look up, by the way. Galatians is heavily focused on brotherly correction, how to deal with those who have been caught in wrongdoing. The subtext is so loud, it's practically screaming.
It really is.
But I want to pause on this word presenting. How exactly does that work?
So presenting is this old, deeply traditional way of singing in church, particularly in the Scottish Highlands and Islands. Historically, congregations didn't have enough hymn books.
Or they couldn't read.
Right, perhaps the congregation wasn't fully literate. So a leader, The precentor would sing a single line of a psalm aloud, and then the entire congregation would echo that exact line back to him.
So John sings a line of Galatians in English, and Cal, 300 miles away in a phone box, echoes it back to him in Gaelic.
Precisely. And think about the mechanics of that interaction. A precentor isn't asking for your opinion.
Right.
He isn't asking how your day was. He is delivering a script, and your only job is to repeat it. It's a broadcast. It's not a dialogue.
Cal actually compares it to calling the speaking clock. Like, you call a number, an automated voice tells you the exact time, you calibrate your watch, and you hang up. You don't ask the speaking clock how it's feeling.
John even laughs at that comparison, taking it as a compliment, because he genuinely believes his son's spirit requires constant calibration.
Right. Of course he sees it that way.
But what's fascinating here is that amidst all this avoidance, they do share one highly specific safe zone where they actually communicate, and it involves their shared professional history. The MacLeod men are weavers.
They've spent generations holding cloth up to the light, judging exact hues.
Exactly. They possess this hyper-refined language of color. So when John needs to update Cal on the failing health of Granny MacLeod, Cal's grandmother, he avoids the emotional weight of mortality entirely.
He doesn't say he's scared.
No, he tells Cal that her swollen feet are the exact shade of calf's liver.
And Cal instantly visualizes it. He knows that specific, horrifying amalgamation of purple, gray, and cream. He knows it looks both dead and uncomfortably raw.
Discussing the precise shade of a failing limb serves a vital purpose for them. It strips the emotion out of the crisis. It's just an objective observational fact.
Yeah.
For these two men, debating color is the only emotional vocabulary they have left that doesn't trigger a landmine. Asking why Cal isn't there to help, well, that leads to an argument. But agreeing on the color of liver, that is safe harbor.
But because a safe harbor of color isn't enough to sustain a family, Cal eventually has to make the physical journey back. And the sheer physical toll of this trip perfectly mirrors the psychological dread he's carrying. I mean, he is traveling less than 300 miles, but it takes him nearly 20 hours.
The geography of the Scottish Highlands and the Hebrides is just unforgiving. It's an exhausting relay race of buses, coaches, overnight hostels, and ferries across some notoriously rough stretches of water.
Right, and what struck me is how Cal behaves along the route. He passes through places like Partick in Glasgow or Fort William, places with a heavy island diaspora.
Yes, communities of people who left.
He knows people there. He knows families who would eagerly give him a warm meal and a free couch for the night. But he actively avoids them. He's practically destitute, yet he chooses to blow the last of his toilet cleaning wages on a bottom bunk in a random backpacker's hostel. I kept thinking, why reject free hospitality when you're starving?
It's the psychology of the exile. Cal feels entirely unloved. He feels like a sulky teenager harboring a massive secret.
Yeah, that makes sense.
To accept the hospitality of the island diaspora would require him to perform, to answer questions about his life, his job, his plans. He is isolating himself long before he ever reaches the water because the performance of being fine is just too exhausting.
Which brings us to the ferry ride across the Midge. This is the strait of water separating the mainland from the islands, and the weather is atrocious. The boat is heaving. And Cal's chosen coping mechanism for this final leg of the journey is to swallow a tablet of ecstasy and wash it down with a can of cider.
He is desperate to arrive numb. He knows that the moment he sees the outline of his father's White House on the coastline, his chest is going to tighten.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. Taking ecstasy on a violently rocking ferry across the Minch sounds like an absolute nightmare scenario, like a recipe for a panic attack, not numbness.
Oh, absolutely.
And the tragic irony here is that he's trying to remain invisible, right? But he's dripping wet, dragging a bin bag full of his worldly belongings. His jaw is grinding furiously from the drugs. He has a bleeding spot on his forehead he keeps picking at. And to top it all off, he's wearing an acidic, neon lime green hat.
He is a walking contradiction. He wants to disappear into the background, but he's practically glowing. And inevitably, he sits right across from a well-dressed older woman from the island village of Shawbost.
She spots him immediately. She offers him a sugary pastille, visibly sniffs the cider on his clothes, and then starts questioning him. But she doesn't just ask his name, she demands, "Who do you belong to?"
That phrasing is crucial. It points to the island concept of slóin tairícht, or lineage. In this deeply traditional culture, you were never considered a standalone individual.
You're just part of the chain.
Right? You are merely the latest link in a long chain of ancestors. Your identity is your geography and your bloodline.
And Cal is forced to answer in that format. He is reduced to John of Brambit.
Think about the immense psychological weight of that moment. He's sitting there, high, miserable, and desperately trying to hold on to his independent city-dwelling self.
Yeah.
But this woman's simple question forcefully yokes him right back to his father, his grandfather, and the generations before them. He feels this oily, bitter resentment toward his family for existing, for pulling him back.
But intertwined with that resentment is a crushing sense of shame. He knows these people love him, and he hates himself for viewing their love as a burden.
Exactly.
That divided self is captured so perfectly right after he gets off the ferry. He ducks into this brutalist concrete bus shelter by the docks to recack his bin bag, and he essentially performs an archaeology of his own life.
He does.
He takes his free gay newspaper and his Walkman and buries them at the absolute bottom. He covers them with trendy London magazines, then piles his dirty laundry on top, and finally, he crowns the entire bag with his mother's discarded Bible.
He is literally layering his identities, ensuring the one his father expects is the only one visible on the surface.
Now, Cal's response to this unbearable tension is constant chaotic motion and chemical numbness. But what's fascinating is that his father's response back on the island is the exact opposite. John is suffocating in absolute paralysis.
While Cal is wrestling with the sea, John is physically and emotionally trapped in his own home. And the physical environment of his house is a direct reflection of his internal terror.
It's a bleak morning routine. The leeward wall of John's house is literally subsiding, the coastline is eroding, and the house is cracking apart. And John tracks the progress of this massive structural crack in the plaster using pencil hatch marks.
Right. He marks the collapse of his home the exact same way his late wife used to mark Cal's childhood height on the door frame.
Oh, wow. And within that collapsing house, John is lying on a broken mattress that sags in the middle. We get this incredibly raw, intimate moment where John is attempting to masturbate into a folded pillow, but he's abruptly halted because the iron bed frame squeaks loudly against the wall.
The description of that squeak is masterful. It sounds like a fist on the pulpit.
A fist on the pulpit. Instantly, all his religious conditioning comes crashing down on him. He freezes. The text makes it clear he is overwhelmed by intense self-disgust.
He's appalled by the weakness of his own flesh.
Yeah, by his pathetic, lingering human needs.
That revulsion toward the physical body dictates his entire life. He equates the flesh with failure and the spirit with discipline.
But the contradiction in his character is so poignant. Later that very same morning, John discovers his prize ram dying out on the hillside. The seagulls have already taken the animal's eyes, and what does this rigid, austere man do?
He sits with it.
Yes, he sits on a rock in the wind and sings to this dying sheep as if it were a sick child. He covers it gently with an oilcloth. He possesses this well of boundless, breathtaking tenderness for a suffering animal, but he affords himself absolutely zero grace for his own suffering.
Because the animal is innocent, but his own flesh is sinful. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, as his internal world crumbles, as his house cracks and his own left hand develops an uncontrollable tremor, John compensates by imposing tyrannical control over his external environment.
He times his drive to the bus stop to precisely 22 minutes so he doesn't waste a second of the working day. He carries a little chitty card in his breast pocket where he literally keeps a tally of his neighbors' church attendance.
He knows exactly who has missed the Sabbath.
He is desperately trying to quantify and control a world that is slipping away from him.
We see this play out perfectly when he's sitting in his Jeep, listening to the radio. He catches a faint broadcast of Karen Carpenter singing.
Oh, this part.
He listens to her contralto voice and considers it an astonishing divine gift from God. But in the exact same breath, he judges the physical waste of her body as an absolute sin.
He reveres the pristine, controlled spirit, but despises the messy, vulnerable body. And this absolute terror of the messy physical reality of the world isn't just about his house or the radio. It is exactly what he dreads about his son walking through the front door.
Yes, John loves Cal, but he is secretly dreading his return. Cal represents the modern world's judgment upon the traditional island life.
John vividly remembers a summer when Cal brought a wealthy English college friend home, and the two of them walked around John's house, examining the old furniture and the scuffed skirting boards. John describes it as a restless gaze. Wait, I'm a little confused by John's reaction here. Isn't looking at old traditional furniture like it's a museum piece a form of appreciation? Why is John so insulted by that?
Because there is a massive difference between lived survival and aesthetic tourism. For John, that furniture isn't a quaint antique. It's the utilitarian reality of his hard-fought life. When Cal and his friend look at it like a museum exhibit, they're turning John's active, breathing life into a relic of the past.
It makes him feel small.
Exactly. It makes John feel like his entire existence is somehow lacking or primitive. He feels sullied by that modern evaluation.
That friction between the modern and the traditional boils over perfectly in an encounter John has while waiting in his Jeep. He runs into two local brothers, Innes McGuinness and his younger brother Sorley.
These two brothers are almost a funhouse mirror of the dynamic between Cal and John.
Sorley is the younger brother who got to leave. He went to university in Glasgow, earned a PhD in French history, couldn't find a job, and ended up penniless right back on the island croft, and he is insufferable.
Totally insufferable.
He uses big academic words to demean his older brother, and he literally sits down with a notepad to sketch out Chinese factory socialist systems to apply to the local tradition of digging peat.
Which is an entirely absurd proposition. Peat digging is a 3,000-year-old communal survival tactic.
So what does this all mean? It's like Sorley is an outside corporate consultant coming into a family business that's about survival, not efficiency, and completely missing the point. The expert is completely blind to the fact that the inefficiency, the physical suffering, and the slow communal labor is the actual glue holding the culture together.
It's not about maximizing yield, it's about survival and community. And this raises an important question about whether education and leaving the island actually broadens these characters, or just alienates them from their only community.
Right.
Sorley's education breeds a deep suspicion of the outside world in his older brother, Innes, who stayed behind to run the croft. Innes represents the stasis of the island. He is rooted. But crucially, even Innes is quietly desperate for some kind of outside connection.
This detail blew my mind. Innes comes up to John's Jeep and proudly pulls out this official QSL radio card.
Let's explain what that is. Innes is a ham radio operator. Ham radio enthusiasts use massive antennas to bounce shortwave radio signals off the Earth's ionosphere, trying to skip those signals across continents and oceans.
Right.
When you successfully make contact with someone far away, you exchange these QSL cards through the mail as physical proof of the connection.
And Innes is incredibly proud because he has proof that he managed to bounce his signal through the darkness all the way to Gran Canaria in Spain.
Now, compare the mechanics of what Innes is doing to what Cal is doing in that phone box in Edinburgh.
Oh, that is devastating.
Yeah.
Innes is bouncing a radio wave off the ionosphere to a stranger in Spain, and Cal is bouncing 3 electronic pips off the telephone exchange to his father.
They're the exact same mechanism. Both men are sending blind, coded signals out into the dark, desperately hoping that someone, somewhere, will acknowledge they exist. Innes can reach Gran Canaria, but he can barely speak to his own brother sitting a few feet away from him in the peat bog. Cal can coordinate a synchronized psalm-singing session from 300 miles away, but he can't tell his father who he actually loves.
It's layers and layers of profound isolation, and that really brings us to the core of what we're meant to take away from this deep dive. On the surface, John of John looks like a standard narrative about the clash between the modern city and the traditional country. But underneath, it is a staggering portrait of two men who genuinely love each other, but who are separated by this vast ocean of unsaid things.
They're both terrified of what the truth will do to the fragile structures holding their lives together. John watches his house crack and his body tremble, clinging to routine to stave off the chaos.
And Cal starves and exhausts himself, physically burying his true identity beneath Bibles and dirty laundries.
They're forced to rely on proxies just to feel some semblance of connection. They rely on presenting scripture, they debate the exact shade of calf's liver, they draw pencil hatch marks.
They are clinging to the shape of a relationship that just doesn't fit either of them anymore.
It forces you to consider the architecture of your own relationships.
Exactly. I want you, the listener, to think about your own family dynamics. Do you have a calf's liver proxy topic? Is there that one highly specific, incredibly safe thing you use to talk to a relative? Maybe it's the weather, maybe it's sports, maybe it's the stock market, when the real truth of your life is just too heavy or too dangerous to share.
We all build these safe languages. They're the tools we use to navigate the people we love the most, but cannot fully reach.
And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We mentioned at the start that there's an epigraph to this story. It's a quote by George Eliot from the novel Silas Marner. It suggests that a man's daily work, pursued steadily, acts as a bridge over the loveless chasms of his life.
It's a powerful, comforting idea that duty and routine fill the empty, loveless spaces we find ourselves in.
But looking at Cal shivering in that phone box, and looking at John singing to a dying ram on a windswept hill, perhaps these chasms aren't actually loveless at all. What if the most agonizing chasms in our lives are the ones that are completely overwhelmingly filled with love, but utterly lacking a shared language to express it? You outgrow the coat, you outgrow the shape of the place you left, but the love doesn't disappear, it just gets trapped in the silence.
It gets caught in the static, suspended somewhere between the 3 pips of a phone call and the distance of a radio signal.
Exactly. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep examining the shape of the things you've outgrown.